We got folks in. All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started, Meryl. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining this evening, this Sunday evening, and thank you for accessing this session whenever or however you're going to access it later. My name is Luvelle Brown, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as superintendent of schools. And I'm joined by a great friend and colleague, Meryl Phipps, who is going to be the moderator of this session this evening. Like all of our community conversations, we tend to have them be about 45 minutes or so, but tonight we can go over if needed. Meryl is the executive director at the Village at Ithaca, and I'm going to ask Meryl to tell us a little bit more about herself, and then she's going to jump right in. This is going to be an informal Q&A, and she has a lot of questions that have come in through our Let's Talk portal and have come into her office, and we're taking questions with the Q&A tab on your screen this evening. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Meryl. Thank you for doing it.
Oh, thank you so much. As you said earlier in the week, I was voluntold. So here I am. My name is Meryl Phipps. I am the executive director at Village at Ithaca. We are a local nonprofit organization that has been advocating for educational equity for all students, particularly Black, Latinx, low income, and other underserved populations for almost 2 decades at this point. I'm also an attorney, and I am the parent of 10 children who have attended Icsd in some capacity, 5 of whom did not make it through with a traditional graduation, 4 of whom are still currently enrolled, and 1 who is an IHS graduate. So that's me.
Thank you for doing this again so much.
Absolutely. You ready to just jump into some conversation?
Yeah, let's jump in. I'm looking forward to the conversation, and yeah, I'm sure you will push me quite a bit. Let's go.
Great. So just logistically, we've got a couple of questions that I've put together with the help of my staff and some of the young people who work at the Village at Ithaca. We've got some questions that have come in through the Let's Talk portal, and then we will go to the Q&A. I want to say thank you to Emily Tracy Arm, who is handling the Q&A, which is incredibly important given that my own Zoom capability is really non-existent. So apologies in advance for anything I managed to do wrong while just sitting here and looking at a screen, because it's still possible. So first question, and this is something I asked you, Dr. Brown, when you first brought up this idea. Why me? Why am I moderating this conversation?
Oh, wow. That is a good first question, Meryl. Thank you for that question. And again, thank you for doing this. You embody what our vision as an organization is. We say 6,000 plus thinkers, and that, 6,000 represents our young people. The plus represents our community. And yes, you're a creative thinker. You solve problems each day. But as we've defined thinking, we talk about folks who work with the great diversity that exists in our community, all the diversity that exists in our community. That's you, Meryl. We talk about folks who can recognize one another, their blind spots, and help other folks recognize their blind spots, help other folks recognize their biases. You've done that for folks all over our community. You've done that for me. I cannot think of a conversation, Meryl, you and I have had. Well, one, you're not yelling at me, but 2, you're not pushing me and us as an organization to recognize where we have issues and where we have challenges. Typically, I know what those challenges are as well, but there have been times when you've brought things to me that I have not seen. And you've pushed me to be better. You've pushed us to be better, and we are better today because of you. And so I just appreciate you. I have not left a conversation with you without learning something, without being frustrated in where we are, and also not being inspired to do more the next day. So I just appreciate you. And when thinking about someone to engage in this dialogue, to talk about anything and everything, I couldn't think of a better person than you. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Let's see how you're feeling in about 45 minutes. So it's been a pretty interesting couple months, couple years, in our district, in the world. I want to start by talking about the events of the last month or 2. Back in January, you resigned your position as superintendent, and then a few weeks later, you changed your mind. I've also heard a few years back that you almost resigned to go work in Rochester. And I'm going to ask this question the way one of our Village students put it. If you love us so much, why do you keep trying to leave us?
Oh, thank you for that question. And I've heard that question before. And there's a lot to unpack. So if you can bear with me to unpack it all. And what I don't get to, you remind me, and I'll come back to. That's just, the question. I heard that question almost 11 years ago now. From the young people I had mentored, loved, and raised and worked with in Virginia. And they said, if you love us, why are you leaving? To go to a place none of us know, no one had heard of Ithaca, New York, in Central Virginia, where I had been all my life, working for decades, since I was a teenager working in schools and in the community to be a community activist, working with young people. So when making the decision to come here to work, I got that same question then. And I'll respond, and I got the question in January when I announced that I would be leaving, started the transition. I got that question from young people here. And I responded in a similar way. Then 11 years ago, and I'm going to respond now, and I responded in January to the young person. The love I have is unconditional. People who know me and see me every day know I love the young people that I've committed my life to serving. That love is not binary. You don't love me or you don't love me. I'm a public educator, and I say public educators are educators for young people everywhere. And yes, I committed to being in Virginia and serving young people there. I never thought I was going to leave, and I've said I'm never going to leave Ithaca. That love is real. And so I want young people to recognize that you can love no matter where you are. Now, yeah, I had to make I made a decision back in 2010, and I had made a decision that I needed to change. And I'm going to ask for forgiveness. I asked for forgiveness of the young person who asked me that question back in January, and I'm going to ask for forgiveness from anyone who's hearing my voice today. Forgive me. I changed my mind. And I know the disruptions that come along with when someone changes their mind. I recognize that. And I'm asking for your forgiveness. I'm sorry from the bottom of my heart. It breaks me up to have you feel like, one, whether or not I'm committed to you loving you, or just wondering what was going to happen with your superintendent. And for that, I'm apologetic. I'm also apologetic, and I'm asking you for your forgiveness because I learned something through this process. I underestimated, one, that this is a decision. I'm going to talk about why it was so personal of a decision back in January and why it's so personal of a decision for me to stay. When I made that decision, I underestimated how, when one is making a personal decision because of personal situations and things that are happening in one's personal life, that folks will want to know why. My parents always raised me to say, you're going to give up a lot of privileges. We're going to come back to that later. I underestimated that I was giving up the privilege to privacy when it comes to one's decision, a decision about whether you're going to leave a job or take a job. Yes, I recognize it can impact the entire community, but ultimately it's a personal decision. And I was making that decision, and the folks who know me know I've been saying for 10 years that at 10 years I was going to be thinking about what I do next. I think I owe that to myself and I owe that to the community. And it was around that, this is 10 years for me, and I was thinking about what do I do next? But no matter what I was going to do, it was always going to be in service to the young people in this community. And folks who know me and who had conversation with me and know that a lot's happened in my life since March, at the beginning of this pandemic. I lost my mother in the beginning of this pandemic. The person who I talk to every day about decisions like this, about what we do for schools, how we serve young people, the decisions I make in service of young people, the person I talk to every single day all of a sudden was gone. And that set me back. I'm still set back by it. And my whole family is reeling, or community is reeling because of it, a year later. So I was struggling. And in addition to struggling with what I would do without having my mentor help inform that, I was also struggling with, what did I do to serve my father, who was there now by himself for the first time in 60 years. So in my mind, I'm telling y'all right now, I was thinking about what could I do to continue to serve in this community, because I was never going to leave. I hope I live and retire and stay in this community forever. I was always going to be here. What could I do to continue to serve the young people in this community and support my pops too? Knowing that the role that I'm in now impacts that, giving up privileges. You give up the support you can provide for your family when you're doing justice work like I'm doing, service work like I'm doing. So I was struggling there, and my family was struggling there. What did we do to support him? Some things cleared up quickly shortly after I announced that I was going to transition, in a way where things were stabilized, in a way where I could, maybe I don't have to give up this role that I love and have committed to. And at the same time, he helped me in ways my mama used to help me by, it's not always about what you do, D.O., it's about who you be. And I've been raised and reared and have committed to being a public servant, a community servant. And you do that by serving as superintendent. Now, the role I was going to take on, and I said it at the board meeting, was going to be one where I could serve young people here, but also serve young people all over the world. The work that we're doing here, the work that we are doing to engineer environments for young people who are becoming social agents for change. the work we're doing here to produce equity, change data, it's work that, I mean, people know, people all over the world have been coming to learn about what we're doing here. I was thinking about how do we scale that? And we can continue to scale it with me still being superintendent, but yeah, this opportunity that was presented to me would have allowed me the opportunity to stay in this community, serve in this community. Heck, I was even hoping that I would call you, Meryl, and serve on the board at the Village at Ithaca. How could I serve the young people in this community and serve young people all over the world as a public educator or as an educator? So yeah, I was going through a lot there. And you know, the day after I announced that I would start that transition, I heard from my father, I heard from young people here, I heard from community members here, I heard from our Board of Education here. You're like, let's think about this, because you, for 10 years, you've been talking about who you be, and that's much more important than what you do. And yes, fortunately, I was able to reverse and change up and be back. And the board accepted me back, and I'm looking forward to the next 10 years of serving in this community. But please know, I'm asking for your forgiveness as I was going through a tough time personally, trying to decide what I would do, and at the same time forgetting about who I be. But never was it a situation where I was not committed. Quite frankly, I'm more committed to the young people I serve in this community and others than I ever have been before in my life. So, Meryl, that was a long-winded answer, but I think it was important for me to share it with folks because that's what's on my heart and that's what's real. I don't care what anybody else says, that's exactly what happened. And I feel vulnerable sharing with y'all that, yeah, I felt like I had to give up the job that I've been wanting all my life and love more than anything in this world. And for 10 years, I've been committed to, people know, 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, give it up to support someone who needed it, probably more so than me at that time. And fortunately, we got some things stabilized. Fortunately, I was able to figure some things out quickly, and hopefully we can keep things moving in the same ways we've been doing for the last decade.
I appreciate you sharing about your personal experience, and I am going to follow up and ask you if your decision to resign and then your decision to stay had anything to do with the allegations that are about you in the current petition to the Commissioner of the Department of Education alleging abuses of power.
Mm. Yeah, and I'm sure you'll ask me more about that, but no, no. What I just went through for the last 6 minutes of an explanation and what I've gone through the last 10 months in my life, please know my decision to leave and my decision to stay, and my wishes to stay had nothing to do with some allegations, not at all. And let me be clear, there was no new contract. I've heard people say, did you get a new contract? No, it was not about that. People don't, and there was no offer that was rescinded. My commitment here is bigger than any contract I could get somewhere else, or anything else. I'm here. And I'll go back, you mentioned it earlier, and you were alluding to it. People say, why are you always trying to leave? This is the only time I even thought about leaving in a decade. And I know that, every single day I've been here, I've been asked by someone, and some people who probably listening know that every single day someone asks me, when are you leaving? I've 10 years I've been trying to figure out what that means. I'm still trying to figure out. I've had numerous recruitment efforts and job offers, but the only time I ever considered leaving was back in January. The other ones were just media reports. And people who know me best know that I've never thought about leaving until then. Just wanted to clear that up too. And now staying, from my perspective, is a significant commitment to doing this much, much longer as well.
So, as I mentioned, there is a complaint that has been submitted to the New York State Department of Education. There's a lot of media reports about it. There are a lot of legal documents that can be read. We could probably spend the next 4 or 5 hours, 4 or 5 days talking about it. I don't want to do that. And in deciding what questions to ask and what allegations to ask, I actually put a team of my young people at the Village on reviewing everything they could find. And I asked them to identify which, if any, of the allegations involved they wanted me to ask about. So I'm going to ask 2 questions. The first is, did you hire your former administrative assistant for personal reasons?
Absolutely no. I met them for the first time as part of a committee hiring process, period. And let me go even further. And people have heard me say this before, and I alluded to it even earlier. I know as a community servant, I've been reared to be a community servant in a social justice advocate and activist. With that, I was told by my elders that to serve in that way, you need to be prepared to engage in a lot of conflict, but more importantly, be prepared to give up privileges. And it's taken me 20 plus years to understand what that meant, particularly the privilege part, recognizing that you sacrifice your family, you can sacrifice your friends, you sacrifice even your rights to privacy and your own employment rights at times. People ask for that. So I know and knew what I'm signing up for, and I'm prepared for that and all that comes with it. But there are other folks whose names have been mentioned that have not signed up for that. And it's unfortunate that their rights have been violated. Their professionalism has been questioned. Good people. Anyway, to answer your question, absolutely not.
Thank you. So my next question is whether you improperly use district technology for personal use.
Absolutely not. Let me tell you, because I think I know where that question is coming from because I've heard it and what was alleged. Yeah, back in March, in the beginning of a pandemic, I, as the instructional leader of an organization, was asking every educator to create Google Classrooms and to engage in ways they had not in virtual platforms. People who know me know I would never ask you to do that unless I'm prepared to do it too. I don't have a classroom. I don't have young people I'm teaching every day. While I visit young people every day, I don't have a group of young people I engage with every day as part of my class, other than the ones who live in my house. So a classroom I set up, a Google Classroom I set up with the help of a young person, to be honest with you. I set up to realize, to figure out how to do it. And it was set up in the states that it was up for about 6 hours and never used other than me being able to say, yes, I can do it. So if folks want to call that inappropriate, that's unfortunate, but it was not inappropriate. It's not for personal use other than my own personal professional development, which is what I've asked other educators to do. When you're asking folks to innovate and take risk, I'm hoping that we use the technical tools that we're all getting used to. They're all emerging technologies to experiment and try something new. But in no way was I using it inappropriately or simply for personal gains.
Given the volume of allegations about you in the media, in these complaints, what would you say to those in our community who have lost trust in our school district?
I would say the same things I've said for the last decade. And frankly, I've had the good fortune of engaging with folks who've lost trust, who felt marginalized, who've had real questions, concerns, who've been challenged, who've been oppressed, who've been failed by our school district. I've had those conversations for a decade, and I'm having them right now. And even when they're about me, I will ask you to do the same thing. I'm asking folks to engage. When Ithaca, New York was I call it the epicenter for the lead in the water crisis for school districts. People were angry and lost trust. I asked folks to engage. When we were challenged with our inclusiveness with the performing arts program, young people wanted to see the great diversity that exists in our school district represented on the stage and in the performances. I asked folks to engage. When we were facing tough fiscal challenges, we needed to override our tax cap, and we were eliminating positions and programs that we knew were going to be tough to replace. When we were transitioning to a self-funded healthcare program, we were shifting folks from one health plan to another, heterogeneous math grouping at the middle school level. I can go on and on. Maybe I'm not reading off a resume, but I'm reading off some of the challenges we've had over the decade, similar to what we're having right now, that are part of a growing organization. And I've asked folks to engage. And see, people know when we talk about student engagement, we talk about it on a continuum from rebellion to retreatism to levels of compliance to true engagement. And true engagement, that's where we want our educators, we want our community, where the work is meaningful to them. They're passionate about it. They're engaged nonstop. They want to know what's happening. They want to contribute to what's happening. They want to push. See, engagement is also very much like rebellion. See, when I hear a lack of trust and I hear folks feeling challenged or folks being angry or who've been failed, I see and can connect that to rebellion. It's a level of engagement. It's just not quite always the one we want. So what I'm asking for folks to do, either be rebellious, because that means you're engaged, or be truly engaged. You're either going to be saying, I need to get involved more, I need to change something, or they're going to be saying, I got you, I understand what you're doing, let's do this. But what I don't want is for compliance and retreatism, because that's not how an organization and a community grows. If you're going to be saying, oh, I'm just going to wait until this person or the next thing, this person leaves or the next thing to happen, or if you're just going to be back, just tell me what to do, that level of compliance and that level of retreatism is not what I want. So again, I want that passion. If you've lost trust, boom, log into our budget meetings, log into our policy committee meetings, log into our board meetings, engage in the public dialogue, come to sessions like this on a Sunday evening where Meryl is drilling me with these hard questions about my personal and professional life. That's engagement, that's what I want. And if you're angry, I'm gonna put in the chat, or Emily's gonna put in the chat, here's my email. Send me your questions. If you just wanna unload on me, send that to me too, because I read every single one. But what I do want is your engagement. So that's what I would say to the folks who've lost some trust, who feel the challenge. Thank you.
It's actually a really good segue to my next series of questions, where I will engage with you on some of my favorite topics. I have heard you state publicly many times that public schools are racist institutions. What do you mean by that? And what specifically needs to happen here in our district to eradicate white supremacy?
I knew that was going to come back. I knew that was, yes, I've said it. School districts, our school district, we're institutionally oppressive organizations. We're ableist, classist, sexist, racist. And see, I say that because I believe in the genius of all young people. I believe that school districts should be cultivating that genius in all young people. Let me say that again. I believe in the genius of everyone, and that school districts should be cultivating the unique gifts and talents for every young person. Yet when I look at our historical data in this school district and districts all over the country, when I look at our data, it doesn't reveal that. It reveals that the young people who, quite frankly, who look like me, those who live in poverty, those with quote unquote disabilities, we can pretty much predict whether or not they're going to succeed or fail in our schools for generations. So unless you believe in some kind of racial hierarchy or some other kind of hierarchy, you can't look at that kind of data and say that we aren't institutionally oppressive. And if you want to challenge me on that, remove the emotions and bring to me the research and the data, and let's have that conversation. And then I'll bring to you my lived experiences. Yeah, that's what I just shared was grounded in decades of research and data. And I would love to engage in some conversation with folks who want to challenge me on it. But the next part is from a lived experience. So I've been in school since I was 5 years old, every single day. I was that one kid in the country who had perfect attendance graduating from high school, and my twin brother. So I've been in schools every single day since I was 5. And I'm telling you right now, I'm gonna be absolutely clear, there has not been a day, and I'm talking about not only as a student, but as a professional, there has not been a day when I haven't felt marginalized, tokenized, or oppressed in some way. So don't talk to me about our schools aren't institutionally oppressive, because now that I know what it looks like and feels like, and I knew it when I was 5, to be honest with you. Now that I can understand the policies and I'm able to look for bias, and I'm able to see how it can happen in very subtle ways, it can happen day after day, over years. Don't tell me it's not, because I've lived it. And I've committed my life to disrupting it. Again, every single day as a student and every single day as a professional, I've experienced it in schools and in communities, if you want to be real. So yeah, when you hear me say it, that's where it's coming from. It's coming from data and research, but it's also coming from a lived experience. And it's also why I've committed my life to disrupting it. And like my mother said to me, as she spent her entire life trying to disrupt it too, it will come with you losing privileges. It will come with significant resistance. It will come, that resistance will come in different forms. It will come in the form of, rebellion. It will come in the form of rumors, lies, character assassination, gossip. It will come. when you're attempting to disrupt institutional oppression. But she said to me, and what she did for me, she inspired me to take her place when she was gone. And what I'm doing, and I hope it's another 10 years, I'm hoping I inspire somebody to take my place when I'm gone, to pick up this and keep it moving. That's probably more than you asked for, but you got me going there, Meryl. But I thank you for the
No, I
question.
want more. I want to know what specifically we're going to do to disrupt that white supremacy culture here, and specifically to disrupt our school to prison pipeline here in Ithaca. Tell me specifics. Tell me what we as a district, we as a community can do, will do to disrupt that culture.
Yeah, but one, you mentioned that notion of white supremacy culture, and there may be folks online who don't know that research and know those characteristics. So maybe I'll put in the chat where that's coming from and what we mean by that. It's not about an individual or a person, it's more of an ideology. And it talks about perfectionism, a sense of urgency. So that culture is one that we know is part of school culture that has resulted in inequities for generations. What I've presented is that a culture of love, forgiveness, trust, patience, commitment, that's the antidote to the culture that we have right now. So let's just take, for example, code of conduct. That's a policy. And for folks who don't know what code of conduct is the ways in which we've had policies to quote unquote manage behaviors. It looks like a document that has what happens when they're infractions, behavioral infractions, everything from wearing hats and hoodies, which I've seen around our country over the years, to a fight. What do you do as a school district to respond to that? Now, those policies, that code of conduct has resulted in inequities. We look at our data, we see that we disproportionately suspend young people of color and those living in poverty and those with disabilities. Another situation, unless we think that, let me say this, somebody said it, a family member said it to me, do we think that Black folks are more disruptive in schools than others? And there may be people who believe that. I don't. Now, when we look at our data and it reveals that we're suspending, we're referring, we're expelling Black folks more so than any others, then we got to think about that's an oppressive, racist policy. So we got to change it. And Meryl, you're on the Code of Conduct Revision Committee, and there are other folks who are on that committee. We've been talking about this now for a couple of years. And what do we do to put forward a policy or an approach to, if we still want to call it managing behaviors, we can do that. Or as I would like to say, engaging with young people. When we think about that, what do we do? Do we suspend? If we're a forgiving culture, if we're a trusting culture, do we still suspend? And folks always go to, well, what happens if kids get into a fight? Let's not even go there yet. Let's just talk about something else first. A minor classroom disruption or wearing inappropriate, quote unquote, inappropriate clothing. Let's talk about what do we do in those situations? Do we suspend? Do we refer? Or do we do something different, which is what the group is grappling with? So again, that's just one, that's code of conduct. It's a community-wide conversation around how do we disrupt the school to prison pipeline. I've been in your office, Meryl, right above your shoulder right there is the school to prison pipeline infographic. And it speaks to institutional oppression. How do we as a community say we're going to disrupt the school to prison pipeline? How do we look at grading differently? How do we look at all the things we do differently to disrupt the marginalization that we know our young people are saying they've been feeling, not just for the last 10 years, but for generations here?
I'm glad you mentioned grading policy. Can you talk a little bit more about the anti-oppressive grading policy work that is happening now in the district?
Yeah, the anti-oppressive grading practices work. Another system, structure, and policy that we're looking at differently because of the pandemic. The question comes up all the time: how do you fail a young person in the midst of a pandemic? It's pushing us to think about grading policies. Now, let's be clear: the grading processes in place right now have been in place here and other places for over 100 years. So as I say to you, Meryl, I keep asking for your patience. We can't change that overnight. It's something that's been in place for 100 plus years. We're not going to change overnight, but we want to do it pretty quickly. But what I want to do is do it quickly in a way where it's sustainable. So I've been a part of attempts to change grading policies in other states. I was doing this work in Virginia. And because we wanted to just quickly go to changing the policy first, it didn't work and it wasn't sustainable. What the folks are doing here, which is what I appreciate about our approach here, is we're starting with reflection. Why do we grade? And what is the history of grading? And when you look at the research associated with why we grade, you will see that we grade in the ways in which we grade today still. We started this about 100 years ago, 100 plus years ago, to classify, sort, and select young people. What if I were to say that right now? We need a system that will allow for us to classify, sort, and select young people at Ithaca High School, ACS, and our middle schools. It just wouldn't even sound right, but we started grading in that way for that purpose. It's another reason why we use the 100-point scale. So we're reflecting on the history of grading, why we grade, because only then, when we realize that we've always used this approach to assessing young people to classify, sort, and select, we also can look at the data to realize that the ways in which we've done it has also resulted in disproportionately failing young people of color and those living in poverty and those with quote unquote disabilities. We've done that. So when we reflect and we realize, we want to be an anti-racist school district, we want to be one that that's going after equity, we can't continue to do the same thing we've always done, which leads to the conflict. So if we can't do what we've always done, then what will we do? How will we change our systems? How will we hold young people accountable? How will we communicate to parents what's happening? Also being in a community that, quite frankly, likes the ways in which many people like the ways in which we've always graded, because it allowed for us to sort and select. It allowed for some young people to be motivated, where most of the young people I grew up with and myself, grades only did things to unmotivate us, if you know what I mean. So we got to have some intellectual friction and conflict to talk about why we've done this, how it's inequitable, and what we need to do to change to be more equitable. And then hopefully with this grading work we're doing, and we're seeing some shifts already at our secondary schools, we come up with a new plan, policy, that is going to be more inclusive and responsive, loving, where we don't have hundreds of young people failing each year, where we are not failing, young people aren't failing in the midst of a pandemic. That's the ultimate goal. But it only happens after a process that involves reflection and some friction/conflict.
I hear you. And I'll say what I usually say to you, which is, while I completely understand and respect how long it takes to overcome something historically oppressive, the longer it takes, the more kids we lose in the now, right? So Ithaca High School, for example, has implemented a COVID-19 emergency grading policy. I'm thrilled by that. I think it's appropriate. But despite that implementation of that policy, it's my understanding that still over 700 Fs were given out at the end of marking period 2. And those Fs are disproportionately being received by Black, Latinx, and multiracial students as compared to white students. So what are we going to do right now for those kids right now in the midst of a pandemic who are failing?
That's a sobering data point. And let me add more about the data point and confront the brutal facts for our community. Those 700 plus Fs at Ithaca High School are consistent with how many we had last year this time. Now, it's inconsistent with the national data, because the national data speaks to districts having significantly more Fs and Ds this year than they did last year. So in no way am I celebrating that we are outpacing the national trend, because at the same time, we still have 700 plus Fs at this time of the school year. So what do we do? The conversation is around, and going back to loving. How do we become a more loving organization? Because when I look at the names of the young people, and I've looked at the names of the young people who have Fs, they're the right students. What about our system needs to change? Do we need to be more patient? Do we need to look at our offerings? Do we need to look at different ways to be more culturally responsive? Do our young people see themselves represented in the curriculum in ways that will motivate them in different ways to turn on that camera, to log into that classroom right now? So we are a lot of work is underway, professional development about, how do we center student voice in the development of our curriculum? As we are now looking at standards, how do we center young people in that conversation? How do we, let's just have conversations with one another and ourselves. How can we say we're a loving organization, we're forgiving, we're patient, and we're giving Fs and incompletes? I understand it now. I'm not saying to any educator on the call, I'm not saying don't give an F or don't give an incomplete, but I'm asking for us to ask the question about what we can do differently the next day. Now, what are we doing? Yeah, of those Fs right now, I know there's a team of folks at our secondary schools who are rallying around those families. making personal contacts, looking at whether or not there needs to be some course recovery. Do we need to take a different course? Is there a need for additional time in this class? So we're doing things we haven't done before to rally around each one of those individual cases, partnering with community members like you, Meryl, to give young people different pathways. What I'm hearing around the country too is, some school districts saying we just won't give Fs. But the alternative to that is, well, young people are just going to take the class again next year. So we don't want young people to spend another year or two in high school. We want to be able to fix this now. And we're going to do that by providing multiple pathways to success. And we have a very talented group of educators, teachers, administrators, a lot of folks who are working on doing this in the most loving way.
All right, I am going to shift to some of the questions that came in through the Let's Talk portal. There's a series of questions that are asking if there are any plans to expand in-person learning this spring, especially now that teachers are being vaccinated, and will there still be a wait list?
Thank you for the question, y'all. This one keeps me up at night. We need the CDC guidelines to shift a bit to allow for us to have more young people in the buildings or in an individual classroom. So that would help. Right now, if we could allow for more young people, if we were given guidance that would allow for more young people to be in a space, that would open up new spaces. Yes, and right now, anecdotally, of our in-person staff, we have a half of our staff who received at least the first vaccine shot, which is good news. So in time, we hope to have all of our educators vaccinated. And with that, we hope that more educators will be choosing in this year, definitely this year, to be back in person, which can open up some new spaces. We added some additional classrooms at the elementary level since February. Well, we're in February now. A few weeks ago at the beginning of the semester to add some in-person space. So yes, we want more young people in person. We're one of the only school districts in our state that's offering a 5-day in-person experience at the elementary level. And we're proud of that. We want to do it for more young people. But there are multiple ways. We need some relief, some guidance relief, and we need the vaccine rollout to continue to work, and with many hopes to work even faster than when it's working right now. So yes, we want more young people back, and we're working on that every single day.
On the flip side, we have a question saying that remote learning, hybrid learning is working really well for some students. Is that an option that will continue in the fall?
Yeah, I said that at the beginning of back in March. I'm trying not to say the pandemic as much as I used to. Back in March, I said this. My hopes and dreams from this is that we will provide more choice to families. I do foresee a future where we have a completely virtual Icsd. I hope that we can provide a hybrid approach where young people are working both in person and hybrid, and a completely in-person experience. Now, the challenge for us as a board, as a governance team, as superintendent, is how do we provide to support the resources to do all well? We have one model that we've been immersed in for 200 plus years that still has a lot of work, as we talked about today. We have a lot of work to do there. That's the in-person model. And we have a hybrid and a virtual one that we've been immersed in for about 11 months. And we've yet to have people in person to do the professional development to get it much better, to get it very, very good. We are working on those too. So yes, that's what I'm hoping my next 10 years is, us building out multiple modalities for our community so that families can have options and are able to choose the best modality to meet their individual needs. And at the current moment right now, we have a blended learning team that's working on professional development, mentoring. We have a lot going on to enhance and improve what we're doing in the virtual space. At the same time, we're doing some stuff to improve what we're doing in the in-person space. So professional development is ongoing, and we are seeking to get better with all modalities continuously.
So related, in terms of talking about the future of our education, there's a question about whether Icsd is exploring outdoor learning in elementary schools post-pandemic. I
hope so. It's been beautiful to see young people engaged and happy and loving being outdoors. I'm even seeing young people outdoors in the middle of a central New York winter. So yes, I think there's some things we've learned through this, things around health and wellness, safety protocols, and instructional practices that I see us growing and enhancing in the future. So yes, outdoor learning is here to stay. And I'm hoping that folks on this call and myself, we will be doing what we need to do to commit the resources to supporting that as well.
So back to right now, there has been concern among families that students are not receiving an equitable education compared to their in-person counterparts when they're learning virtually. What is ICSD doing to address these concerns and ensure an equitable education for all students? Again, this is a let's talk question.
Yeah, I mean, and we would have to define, whenever I hear the word equity and equitable, I ask for a further definition, but I think what I'm hearing, the question or the statement behind that is that it's just not of the same quality. And for us, yeah, we're doing a lot to enhance the quality of the experience for virtual learning. We have distance learning mentors as an example. We have amazing educators who are doing exceptional work in the virtual space, mentoring others, collaborating with others, creating tutorial videos, offering workshops. We have a newsletter focused just on the virtual learning space, their office hours. So we have that. We have the blended learning team that comes together often now, led by Dan Bryman, Lily Talcott, and Mary Grover contributing to that work as well. That's a group of ESP substitutes, administrators, students. So that group is working on ideas, ways to offer additional support, the curriculum mapping, et cetera. So there's a significant amount of work to enhance our experience. And I'll go back to what I said earlier. And again, where I'm asking for folks to be patient. This is not a time for a sense of urgency. It's a time for us to be patient and grow together patiently. It's going to take some time for it to be great and to the standards that we all in Ithaca expect. I know we can get there. But as far as the resource allocation, yes, people need to know we're allocating a significant amount of resources to enhancing the virtual learning experience. And so when I think equity, I'm thinking about the resource allocation that's happening. But also when I think of equity, I'm thinking about the level of experience. And I'm just asking folks to be patient because our educators need that patience right now as they're attempting to perfect a model that we just began back last March.
We have a question that just came in sort of related that says, can the ICSD guarantee that students who were in person this year will not be given preferential treatment for in-person next year?
Yeah, I anticipate we're going to start over. Again, the data will shift, the guidance will shift. We will be thinking, we're thinking already, our team, our governance team, we're thinking about next year already. So yeah, I see us starting fresh with a new reopening approach. And if I have my way, every young person would have an opportunity to be in person. And I think we're going to be there. The vaccine continues to roll out. We get educators vaccinated, the guidance shifts, where we can have more young people in a space. We will have spaces for anyone who wishes to be in person in the fall. That's my goal. I've learned over the last year more than ever, I can't say a guarantee, y'all. Too much happens and too quickly for you to hear me say I'm guaranteeing anything. I wish I could, but I've learned too much over the last year to say I'm guaranteeing anything with the ways data and guidance has shifted almost daily here in our state and in our country.
I'm going to go back to some questions that looks like came in during part of our earlier conversation. What are teachers' roles in dismantling white supremacy in the ICSD?
Well, yeah, and I want teachers, educators, we're all in this thing together. It always starts with reflection. We say white supremacy, we got to understand what that means. It has a different meaning to too many folks. And again, I'm going to send that link out. Maybe I'll tweet it out tonight to really define when we talk about white supremacy culture, what that means and what those characteristics are. So teachers, administrators, community members, we just need to reflect about what is it and what are we talking about? And then how those characteristics, sense of urgency, a right to comfort, only one right way. How does that show up in our individual lives, in our homes? And then more importantly, how does it show up in our learning spaces? Perfectionism, worship of the written word. How does that show up in our spaces? And then how does that stand in the way of equity? Because I will tell you, there are cultures, particularly with the great diversity that exists in our school district, there are cultures where they subscribe to very different characteristics when they think about organizations and community. They don't think about individualism, they think about collaboration and communalism. When you think about a sense of urgency, no, they're much more patient with their approaches to things. See, that's the conversation that we all need to be having right now, just reflecting on what it means, first of all, without pushing away from the table, turning off your cameras, or just looking to pick an argument. Let's just understand what we're talking about. Let's just define what we're talking about, and then reflect on where those characteristics show up in our individual lives and then in our schools. And then how do they stand in the way of equity and inclusion? Because that's the tough part of the conversation. Because some folks would subscribe to or would say that those characteristics are what makes us great. I always say, great for who? See, that's where the conflict will start. When we have an understanding about what we're talking about, but more importantly, how it stands in the way of equity in our schools. And then we can talk about dismantling it. Teachers, administrators, community members, us all.
It is 8:45, but I do have a couple more questions I'd like to get to. Are you okay to hang in there?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. And I do want to apologize for everyone who's submitting questions. I'm doing my best to look 2 places at once. I know I should be used to it by now, but really Zoom and I not working out, but doing my best. So let's see. How is ICSD trying to do better for students with disabilities? There is a lack of support for students with disabilities.
It's ongoing. I heard that last part of that question or statement. There's a lack of support. So the conversation is we need to be reflective about what does that mean and what can we do to support more? And we're allocating a significant amount of resources, and we will continue to allocate a significant amount of resources to support young people. Again, through my travels, I've learned that there aren't many school districts who say that they wish to be inclusive in the ways in which we are. So we practice what we preach, but we know we need to be better. So one, an understanding about what truly inclusive classrooms look like. We're continuing to develop that common mental model. How do we develop schedules to allow for the co-planning time for true co-teaching to take place in our spaces? How do we allocate the resources in our budgets to support special education services, inclusion, young people with disabilities? I'm committing to you, I would present to you that we've been having those conversations for a decade. We have much more work to do. But I think where we need to start is that, there's a significant commitment. This governance team, our board is always pushing me as a superintendent and our team to be better each day. I would ask for, the special education at PTA, the advisory group is engaging and grappling with these topics each and every day. Reach out to me. Again, we're gonna put my email in the chat here in a second. If we haven't already done it. Mary Grover is another point person. But again, just tell us where you see us needing to be better and challenge us to be better. Tell us where we need to be better and challenge us to do something different the next day.
Let's see, we've got a couple questions asking, how can the district improve its curriculum to affirm BIPOC students, and what other ways in which are you supporting students of color?
Great question. I was reading the work from one of my friends. Go to reconstruction.us. Kaya Henderson, she started, it's an online platform right now. When I think about what do we need to do to support young people of color, and we talk about reimagining our approaches to teaching and learning and curriculum development, what would it look like if we began to decenter whiteness and center young people of color in our curriculum work? When looking at that website, Reconstruction, I realized how different it would be. I've never experienced, again, I've been in school since I was 5 years old. And to truly see curriculum that has centered Blackness and people of color was so striking, and I'll admit, uncomfortable for me to be a part of, because I had never been a part of it anymore before. To see my Blackness celebrated in that way, to have curriculum, assessment, instructional strategies be catered to me in the ways in which I learn, the ways in which I embrace verbal overlap, the ways in which I like to move, the ways in which social centrism is a part of my life. When seeing the curriculum and the strategies are focused on that, it was even uncomfortable for me to be a part of it. So what can we do? We can start with that question. How can we use our curriculum, our instructional strategies, our assessment practices to allow for all of our young people to learn about a different culture and different histories, to learn about oppression, power, and marginalization? How can we use our curriculum and assessment instructional strategies to center the experiences of Black folks? Let's just ask that question. And if we truly do it, I'm telling y'all, and we're going to be talking we're going to talk much more about this over the next year, because I want to see us do it. And I'm expecting for folks to feel as uncomfortable when they experience it and when they see it as I felt when I saw it, centered. More to come. But how can we do it? We can just do it. And when we do it, I'm here to tell y'all, that's where once you see it, you can't unsee it. And then we'll, as a community, as an organization, we got to decide, will we do much more of it? Or how much will we shift, knowing how uncomfortable people are going to be? I need to put that link out there. I'll tweet that out and, text, and send that out tonight too, reconstruction.us.
Back to a reopening question, what percentage of teachers and staff need to be vaccinated in order to open schools back up? And when does ICSD expect to reach that goal?
That's a good question. And I'm not afraid to say I don't know, because a lot of it depends on guidance. We could have everyone vaccinated, all staff vaccinated, and the guidance right now from our state and federal government will not allow for us to open back up like we were last March or last February. So again, much of this depends on the guidance that we receive, but it's important for us, let's just get folks vaccinated first, and then let's engage in the conversations with our educators, with our teachers, more importantly, with our state representatives and our health department about how many young people we can get back in the spaces and when we can open up safely.
I think we've got about 3 questions left. Back to grading policies. What role does the teachers union play in rethinking our grading policies?
I think everyone has a role to play. Teachers union, I'm hoping that they have a significant role to play. My role is to facilitate a dialogue. I'm hoping that our educators, which has happened throughout my tenure here, my job is to facilitate a dialogue, get people in the room, to ask them probing questions, and to allocate the resources. I'm committing to do that for our amazing teachers and educators who we're asking to change an approach to teaching and learning that's been in place for 100+ years in this school district. So yeah, does the teacher union, the teachers have a role to play? They are the role. Please know that. I've given grades to graduate students at SUNY Cortland and St. John Fisher, but I've not given a grade to a student in K-12 in a decade or more, more than a decade. So I need some help. I need our educators to help us figure this out. So the most important role is going to be played by our teachers and teachers union.
I'm going to give you a little break because this next question appears to be for both of us, which is how can the ICSD and the Village and other agencies help ICSD students right now with their schoolwork during COVID? So I will give you a chance to rest, and I will let you know that the Village, GIAC, some other community organizations are all doing our best to provide individual support to students and families who are struggling with their schoolwork. And at the same time, we're really providing some supportive guidance to the district to make sure that expectations for students are reasonable, that they have access to the technology and the internet access that they need in order to complete their schoolwork, and to support these continued conversations about whether the curriculum is culturally responsive and whether students see themselves in that work. So from one-to-one virtual tutoring provided by the Village, all-day support that we're providing to some students, GIAC is doing some great work with elementary school students. That's what we've got going on in the community. Go Tutors has continued to be a wonderful asset to our organization. That is what outside community partners are doing. How about ICSD, Dr. Brown?
Wow, that was a beautiful answer. That's what you call an enhanced community partnership, which is what is key to this, enhanced community partnerships. But also, from my perspective, it's leaning on our amazing educators. We have some loving people. So the partnership between teacher and the student is now more important than ever. What is the work? When does it come in? How do we help you engage in new thinking, solve problems, be creative? What is the new standard? That work is, I'm leaving to our talented educators and trusting that they will work with families, our partners, our community partners, and most importantly, our students to solve this complex issue. But we're all in this together.
So I scrolled down on our document and we have more than 3 questions left. I'll give you a couple more and then you let me know when you're ready to be done. But we can, take your lead. So here is another one. You articulate great shifts top down in terms of disrupting systems of racism, but the continued experience of some students is little to no change. How do you help that movement through the layers of people in the district?
Yeah, no, wow, that question makes me emotional because it was the question that I asked as a high school senior of my board of education and superintendent. I think that was the first time I realized I wanted to be an educator. Um, I had no idea I wanted to be a superintendent, but I knew I wanted to be in the classroom because I knew that I could affect that change. So for the person asking that, for the young people who are asking that question every single day, for the folks who are not on the call, who have that question on their hearts and minds, but maybe even afraid to ask it, one, I would ask you to get engaged, um, become an educator, support an educator, come to our conversations like this where we're talking about this issue, challenge us, rebel. You know, we talk a lot about social emotional health, and there are a lot of social emotional learning programs being implemented around the country that I feel like are missing the mark, because to improve social emotional health in schools is to give young people more voice and choice, and to have them feel like they're liberated and they can use the school and experience in the environment to feel liberated, to feel emancipated. So yeah, that comes from everyone. For the folks listening on this call, how can we use our schools to give young people a sense of being liberated and emancipated, to give them voice and choice, to feel like they can change the system that has failed many for generations? It's what allowed for me to survive, because I saw glimmers of hope that I could change the system. And I feel like we have, but I'm still doing it. I'm still doing it here in Ithaca because we haven't done it for enough. And for the person asking that question, I hope you will engage with us to inspire somebody to take your place when you're gone. But I believe in change. I'm a change agent. The person asking that question, I'm hoping you're inspired to be a change agent. Let's just keep fighting, and keep grinding. We're attempting to change a system that was never designed to do what you're asking us to do. Let me say that again. The system was never designed to do what you're asking us to do. It was actually designed to do something very, very different for white males only, I may add. So what do we do every single day to push, to change, to advocate for a different system? Push me, email me that question again tomorrow so I can feel as emotional tomorrow night as I'm feeling right now, knowing that the same question I asked as a high school senior is being asked of me right now, sitting in the job that I thought could change it all. So I'm struggling with that. Hopefully, if this community allows me to stay for another 10 years, I won't be asked that question the next time we do this. And hopefully somebody will be prepared to take my place. Because another 10 years, I may be ready to hand it off for sure to somebody who's ready to take my place when I'm gone.
We have a couple questions that are noting that a lot of the work you're describing needs more teachers. Is there a plan to hire new teachers? And specifically, what are you doing to recruit, hire, and promote teachers of color and other teachers who are prepared to disrupt white supremacy in the ways you've described?
There was a lot. There were 4 questions in there. So yes, if there's an educator out there, I mean, there was a time this year when we couldn't find teachers. So I mean, yes, we are always looking for good people. Now we're going into tough budget cycles to significantly increase the number of FTE. We've done a lot of that this year with hopes that we can get through the challenges of the pandemic. I don't see us continuing to add additional staff in the coming years, but we can focus on the quality, the development of the people we do have. Yes, we need to recruit more people of color, and we need to help develop the folks who are in our spaces right now to be more culturally responsive, inclusive, and loving at the same time. So yeah, we have the Aspiring Educators Program, another link I'm going to send out where we're trying to grow our own. There's several young people who've come through our schools, young people of color who will be teachers in our school district in the near future. Support a young person of color, inspire them, and encourage them to be an educator. Yes, we have Vladira Sims. We have a segment of our HR department that is focused on this issue alone, and we have seen results. Moira Lang, Nicole LaFave, Pat Wasloo. We have folks who are on the HR committee who talk about this at every meeting. And their systems and structures, and Roberta Waller has been doing this work for 2 decades now, and who finally said she sees some things happening that she's wanted to see happen. The ways in which we try to take on confirmation and implicit bias in our screening and hiring processes has allowed for us to open the door for more people of color. I'm hosting recruitment fairs, virtual fairs, along with Galera Sims for educators all over the state. So I could go on and on. This is an issue for us because it's important for us. There are young people in this school district who've gone through our school district without ever having an educator of color. Most young people in our state have gone through their entire K-12 experience without ever having an educator of color. That is a shame. We got to be better as an industry. We got to be better as a community. And I've presented to you some of the examples. Please come to an HR committee meeting where we can talk about more of those strategies that we're using right now.
So it's 9 o'clock. I'm going to pull one last question.
All right.
Let's see. How is ICSD going to assess the academic progress students have made this past year and a half, and how are they going to get kids back where they belong academically?
One, I appreciate the question because you referred to it as academic progress in this year. And I'm hoping that we can eradicate this term academic loss or learning loss from our community's conversation and across the country, because young people are progressing even in the midst of a pandemic. There are young people I know, Meryl, I know that you know, who are getting an A in life, but may not be coming to class every day, or maybe one of those 700 plus Fs at our high school. But they're getting an A in survival as they're taking care of their families. And they're learning skills and they're thinking in ways that we can't assess. And quite frankly, we don't even recognize. But let's just be clear. Because I've talked to a lot of young people who aren't doing well, quote unquote, academically, but who are doing things I couldn't even imagine doing in a home for their family. And they've learned how to solve problems, collaborate with diversity, recognize the blind spots and biases of others in ways that we as educators can't. So one, I think we as a system are going to be thinking and be tasked with how do we assess progress in many ways? And yes, we're going to have to rethink about what this notion of a standard is. We know that the standards were in many ways, well, it's just based on the number of times the standards have changed in our state and in our country. We know that they are evolving and they need to be revisited. Why not revisit them again? So when we talk about figuring out where to catch kids up or get them to where they belong, we got to decide where they belong. Let's just be clear. Because I've seen some curriculum and some curriculum that's mapped to some standards and some pedagogies that have centered a different cultural experience that I think we need some work to do. If we were to create that as the new standard, I will be looking forward to how to get our young people to that belonging or to that space. I mean, I'm saying a lot here. I just hope you're getting a sense that, again, I appreciate us using the word progress. I want us to validate and affirm that all young people are progressing in some ways. I know there are significant challenges. Yes, we need to rally around the young people who are challenged, but also recognize those who are excelling. And I think we need to revisit what this notion of a standard is and where they belong. Maybe we look at multi-age classrooms again, grade levels. We look at that differently again. We look at our course offerings again. We look at ways to redesign courses to make them more interdisciplinary. So we're looking at all of that. And I'm just fortunate and privileged to be in a community that's open to allowing us to be innovative in that way.
All right, so it is 9:03. It is very close to past my bedtime. Could you, before we say goodnight, remind people if they still have questions, if they want to get involved, what should some good next steps be for concerned community members?
Yeah. One, I wish to say thank you for the opportunity to serve and learn. Thank you for, I know I use the word love a lot. Thank you for loving me. One of those characteristics of love is forgiveness and patience. And this community has been forgiving and been patient with me as I've grown as a leader and as a person. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for that. And I wish for you to know that I'm committed in ways I've never been in before in my career, in my life, to this community and the young people we serve. And I'm just asking for you to love me back. And I know love is not a love fest. And I expect that love to be tough, messy, uncomfortable. And also recognize the privileges I have to give up to be loved in this very public way, in this public position. And I'm signing up for it. I'm also asking you to, if you have questions about what I'm doing, you don't like what I'm doing, you want to know more, email me or call me. Email me or call me. You don't have to go talk to somebody else about what he's thinking, ask somebody else what is happening. You talk to me and we can engage. I look forward to the engagement. I look forward to learning from you. Meryl knows well. She's yelled at me a whole lot over the years, and she's made me a better leader in person. I'm hoping that the community can rally and do that for me as well. So email me if you want to use our Let's Talk portal. We have an amazing team. Our board is outstanding. Email, reach out to them individually or collectively. Just let's engage. I'm asking for your engagement or your rebellion. What I don't want is compliance and retreatism. And with that, Meryl, I will send it back to you.
Okay. Well, thank you for everyone who made it through this on a Sunday evening. I hope you all enjoyed your February break and have a successful Monday morning sending those kiddos back to school, either in their Chromebook or in a building. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Dr. Brown.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.